on target here, on track. Beautiful day, Palm Sunday, great time of the year. I titled it today, Palm Sunday, which it's either tragedy or triumph or tragedy. I can't remember which, but anyway, is it a triumph or is it a tragedy? Now, of course, we look at it as a triumph because we know the story well. Can I give you some background? I mean, I know some of you dropped out of high school so you wouldn't have to learn history, but here it is. I want to give you a little history because it really helps you in context to know. What I want you to know a little bit about right now is what was happening in Jerusalem when Jesus entered and the triumphal entry, the Palm Sunday, all the things that we talk about today. What was going on historically? So if you'll allow me to back it up. Plus there are names and situations that we hear at this time of year, but we kind of forget who they are. And I don't have time to go in depth or anything. I take the time, but I don't have the time, right? Because you're going, please don't take the time. But give me a little bit. How about give me a little bit, right? Okay. So you understand what Jesus is about to do is during Passover, right? Passover was the celebration out of Egypt, coming what? Out of what? Slavery. It's a celebration of life, not death. And the angel of death passed over them, and they're about to be freed from 400 and some years of what? Slavery. That's important because when Jesus is beginning to do all this stuff, guess what? It is Passover. It's the celebration of that event in Egypt. It's called Passover. Now, it's very ironic and blinding to a lot of the Jewish leaders because they're celebrating this week, they're celebrating Passover in the time of Jesus, and they're celebrating freedom from slavery while Roman soldiers are bearing down and staring down. They went to the temple, but the soldiers would actually be on the temple and around the temple. They were everywhere. And so how ironic is that? We're going to celebrate our freedom while we're not free. We're not free. And Jesus wanted to teach them how to truly be free, but they couldn't see it. They're blinded to it. The only way they could think of is we need a big army and a big Messiah to knock Rome out of here, and then we'll be free again. And he says, no. Your freedom is going to have to come from the inside out. Then it can be out, yeah, we can get Rome, but it's got to start on the inside. There's something wrong on the inside that you don't see why you're in bondage. You're in bondage because of your own sins and because of the way you handled everything, and now here it goes. All right, so anyway, first of all, we got to remember every time you read the New Testament, not every time, most of the time, as you read different passages, always try to remember Rome is standing on the corner. Because a lot of the things said in this Bible are referring to what they are seeing, what they are feeling, and what has happened to them. They've lost their land. They're paying high taxes. There's corruption everywhere. There's people that are colluding with Romans, and there's others that are not. There's other people who want to kill them. Other people want to kill the people who are colluding with the Romans. They're upset at the taxpayers. They hate it. Everything is influenced by Rome a little bit. So keep that in mind. All right, then they're in the story. When we start the week and we end up getting down to the end of the week, we pop up again Herod, right? This is not the first time we heard about Herod in the birth of Jesus. Now this is King Herod, all right? Now King Herod, how many have heard of him, right? King Herod. And he's there on the scene here. Jesus is going to talk to Herod. And so King Herod was desperate to be liked and loved and cared for and popular, all right? And there's a big problem because actually, they put on the inscription on Jesus' cross, what did they put there? According to the book of John, they put there King of the Jews. And they didn't like that at all. You know why? Because up to that time, Herod was called King of the Jews. What do you think he was king of? King Herod. He was king of the Jews. And that's what they called him. He had inscriptions about it. He put statues of himself around because he wanted to be popular and all that kind of stuff. So we have King Herod. Now, there's a big problem with the king of the Jews, though, at that time, and why he wasn't liked. First of all, he was not Jewish. Which always makes me chuckle a little bit when we find people that call themselves rabbi, and you think, oh, they're Jewish, and you trace them down. They're born in a cabin in Kentucky, or whatever, and they're not even Jewish, and nobody knows it, And so that's what was happening. The King Herod was not Jewish; he was an Arab. Okay. But he wanted to be, and he was clever, and his family worked, and he was political, and he worked his way in, and he got favor. But how did he get to be king then if he's not Jewish? He got to be king because he got friends with the Romans. He met Cleopatra. You remember in the stories of that? Anybody heard of Mark Antony? Mark Antony, he became good friends with Mark Antony. They were best buddies. Yeah, they were best buddies. It was kind of a terror thing because, what was that other guy's name? Should have paid. Yeah, Octavian, whatever. Well, I think he killed Mark Antony or whatever. And so now King Herod's a little lost. So he goes to and says, I know I was best friends with him, but I like you now. And so he's very political, but he's not Jewish. And so being not Jewish, get this, before, when they still had the rundown Temple of Solomon, this is before the Temple of Herod, the temple he built was built, he couldn't even go in it. He wasn't Jewish. The Jews wouldn't let him go in it. It's a little embarrassing to be king of the Jews and unable to attend. And so he built magnificent things. If I remember right, I think he's got to be the one that helped at least, maybe Pilate too, because there might have been Pilate's residence over in Caesarea, which is probably where Jesus went to work with his dad when he was alive. It was close enough. And they built magnificent. And some people have said in Caesarea, what they built there should have been considered a wonder of the world. That's how fantastic it was. But then he wants to be popular. He puts statues up around. He's not popular. So what's he going to do? I'm going to build you the most fantastic temple you have ever seen. Better than Solomon, better than anyone you've ever had, anyone you've ever seen. And I'm going to build it for you. So he spends 8 years just building the Holy of Holies. And he builds it, and he makes this fantastic temple, all right? And this is the temple that Jesus is seeing and going to enter, all right? Now you're up to date on that. That's why I'm bringing that up. And so he builds this temple, and it's really cool and nice. And guess what he does? So he wants to really impress the people. So kind of like today, he builds a mall. And the mall that he builds inside, you walk the journey inside, and you're heading towards the Holy of Holies and all that. But you go past the mall, and it was described to me as I studied it as almost like Fifth Avenue, New York City. Like Fifth Avenue, the highest grade of shopping was inside here, okay, on that walkway. And also then there were other stuff. There's places to live and things like that. But this is all going on, and Herod built all that and thinking, I'll really be popular in that, but he never got popular because obvious reasons. And so this is all going on. So the Rome's going on, then Herod's happening, and all his corruption. He's right in with Rome, right in there. Oh yeah. So he wants. Here's what I almost forgot to tell you. So he wants to be more popular, and so he's married to, I don't remember her name, and he has a son, and he really likes him and loves him, but they're kind of a hindrance to him, because she wasn't Jewish either, and so he banishes her, and decides to marry. She was about 13 at the time, so they had to wait till she was 16. Maybe 13 or 14. So you could marry her when you're 16, and she was a princess of the Jews of Egypt, of the leading class. She was a princess. And so by marrying her, he thought, that'll do it. Now I am officially Jewish because I've married a Jewish, and now I can go wherever I want. You see how he did it? And so he married her. But it wasn't good. He went to Rome, and he took a vacation to Rome, and he met with all the Roman high-up people, and it wasn't good. She probably was just too young for him, and while he was gone, she had a little fun, and so he killed her. But other than that, he really liked her, and they got along well. But then I don't think he banished. I think he banished the first and killed the second. Either way, he was pretty treacherous. Okay. And then we have another character that's going to show up that's also in that, and that's Pilate, right? Pontius Pilate. Pilate was basically the governor of Judea, all right? And he is appointed by Rome. Now, Herod did the same thing. So guess what Herod did? Went back up on him. Guess what he did? He got so mad. He had such a temper. He was so treacherous that he had a bunch of Jews killed for I don't remember why. And it weighed so much on the people, he had to go to trial, sort of, in Rome over what he did. Of course, they acquitted him because, of his friendships and everything. And so then later, to show you the fear of this, Pilate goes along. Now, Pilate didn't have him killed, but he did a whole bunch of stuff that upset the Jews, blah, 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 blah. So he ended up going to Rome also and put on trial. And he got out of it and he goes back. But at that point, Pilate is very fearful of losing his power and making people mad, and so Rome's got their eye on him. That's very important, because of what Pilate does is showing us this pressure from Rome on him, and he's wanting to win the people. And his biggest, shall we say, fear or concern was there would be a riot or an outburst, and the soldiers would have to calm it down, and then they would say, Pilate, what's wrong with you? You are a terrible leader. You can't keep control of these people. Okay? So that's Pilate. That's going on with Pilate. They're watching everything. Now we come to the day when Jesus now enters into Jerusalem. All this is going on while he's getting ready to enter Jerusalem. All these all this stuff is happening, and they're calling him. And so we have these prophetic things, right? Jesus comes. They're going to say Hosanna, and they're going to treat him as though he's the king, and declare him as coming from the throne of David, which King Herod did not come from the throne of David. And yet Jesus does. And so they're going to say he's the King of the Jews. He's the Hosanna to the highest and all that. And he gets, shows that symbolic, and he enters as a king. And then it's interesting that we kind of forget this part, that what he rides, he's entering, and it's prophetic too. It's in prophesied that he would enter riding a colt or a donkey is what it really was. And do you know why that's important? Because a conquering king coming to do war would ride a horse. When you came to bring peace, you rode a donkey. It was their culture. You wouldn't know that, would you? But I found it out, and I found out culture. So he rode a donkey, and the donkey in itself, if they're declaring him as king, they're kind of declaring him as a certain kind of king. He's the king that's going to bring us peace. He's not going to bring us war. He's not going to do the way we thought. And so we have palm branches. Like I said, I think it was only mentioned once, and out of it we get Palm Sunday. But they wouldn't just lay them down or wave them. They'd actually touch the person, and they'd touch them and kind of anoint them and bless them. That'd be a better word. They touch them with the branches and bless and bless and bless. So that's where we get the palm branches. And then they declared him to be king, okay? So he's riding on the donkey. He's got his disciples. He's got all these people and everything. And now we know. I've preached so many sermons on Palm Sunday. I know I'm repeating myself a little bit, but for those who don't know, when I was a kid, we had a lot of Palm Sundays in the Methodist Church up until I dropped out in the 8th grade. But every time we had Palm Sunday, they handed out palms, and we all did the stuff. But then as soon as we sang Hosanna, the service ended. And I never knew till I was way in the ministry that actually he didn't just go Hosanna. He was actually on his way. He rode that thing to someplace. He's going someplace. I didn't know that. Okay, but anyway, I know it now. So he's going someplace. So he goes to the disciples, and all this is going on, and Rome is watching carefully. They're listening to the Hosannas. They're watching, everything's being watched. Herod is nervous, and all that. Okay, so anyway, he rides in, and Hosanna and all that, and where is he going? The Bible tells us he goes right to the temple. Okay, so he goes to the temple, and he goes in, and he looks around, and just looks around, and then he leaves, okay? But when he leaves, he notices, if you'll remember, when he leaves, he sees a fig tree, right? With no figs, or at least not edible fruit. It growing some leaves or something, but you couldn't eat anything off of it. And it had no leaves that you could eat. And so he curses the fig tree coming from the temple. And why did he do that? A symbol of God's opinion of what he just saw. It's God's opinion. And he said this, may no man ever eat from you again. You're done. You're done. You're done. And that's what he's doing. It's not against Jews. It's not against the Jewish people that loved God. There were a lot of them. It's not even against all the Pharisees. There's so many different kinds of Pharisees. A lot of them were good and some not so good. But the religion of Israel that was controlling and in cooperation with Rome and influenced by Rome, that's what he's talking about, okay, not Jewish people. And so he says, and so the curse came on that. Why? Because Jesus is saying, and God's saying, look, your religion is not giving anybody anything to eat. It's unedible. It doesn't produce fruit you can live on. It may look good. It may have leaves. Have you ever noticed today? We have a lot of religion today, right? It's got a lot of leaves on it, but you can't live off of it. The Bible is not being preached very much. Most of it, a lot of Sigmund Freud. They don't say Sigmund Freud, but it is. And he was Jewish too, so maybe that's how they get away with it. I don't know, but Sigmund Freud and therapy. And I'm not against therapy. I mean, it has its place. But we carry Bibles because we're going to use them. We're the other side of it. We present another side. And everybody needs all that. We need all of it. And so we're losing that. And so anyway, he does that. That's what's going on anyway. And so he leaves, goes away. He comes back the next day, right? When he comes back the next day, of course, they're going to see the fig tree. But when he comes back, that's the day now. Now get this. So he walks in again, and he walks that promenade. He walks by Fifth Avenue stores, right? And that's when he turns the tables over, because they're everywhere, and it's every day. But it was high-class merchandising, and he turns the tables over, and he screams out, of my house shall be a house of prayer, right, for all people, and he's setting it straight. But it's really just a declaration of what's wrong, you know. And Herod built it, and they like it, and there's money, and the changing, and corruption, because they were taking advantage of people. Hey, you know what it's like. Let's see. Do you remember? Oh, yeah, not too long ago, we had a Super Bowl in town, right? Well, it wasn't in town, but it was our team, right? And they played it in Arizona, right? Anybody try to fly to Arizona that week? What happened to the prices? Anybody know? Well, you maybe didn't go, but if you thought about it and checked it out, you go, this is crazy. I thought, well, I'll just drive to Arizona and watch the Chiefs play, and I'll just get me even a cheap hotel. There was zero hotel. And everybody raised their prices, right? Is that true? Okay, guess what they did on Passover? Everybody comes from far, hundreds of thousands of people come on the day of Passover. They brought their families, what money they had, they traveled, whatever. Most of them were poor because of everything else I told you about. And then they get to the temple, and what happens? They raise their prices, so to speak. And now it's sky high, you know, it's Passover, and they take advantage of the people that came, and they needed to have a sacrifice. They didn't carry a dove with them or all the way across, a couple of turtle doves. They go and buy them and then sacrifice them, right? And there was just so much corruption, I don't have time to tell it all. But anyway, that's what Jesus saw. And when he shouted and he turned the tables over, and then he leaves the city again, and they see the fig tree is cursed, as I said, no fruit on you, so nobody eats of you again. All that takes place with that. He turns over the shops, the tables, the booth. I'm getting all that done. And then at that point, something has taken place that we miss. Because at that point, we begin to read the rest of the week. We're going to head down to the crucifixion, right? Friday and the crucifixion and the resurrection, all those things. But what was really happening is we see all the activity, and I read it yesterday studying this. I read it again. Some people blame the Jews for the crucifixion. Some people blame the Romans, back and forth, how this, But really, they're missing the whole point. Because as soon as Jesus went in and demonstrated God's opinion, he chose to be killed. He condemned himself to die. He did it. If he hadn't gone in and done that, he wouldn't have been killed. He had to trigger this thing. It was time, right? The time is. And it was time. And it had to happen. So he made it happen, because what happens? So he goes in, he turns the tables over, he does everything. Even book of John says he made a whip, and he's scaring he's really going at it. And then what happens? Right after that, the Pharisees and leaders of the temple, it says, and they met to decide how he should die. If he hadn't have done that, would they have had that meeting? They may have wanted to have the meeting, but that was the last straw, so to speak, in that he chose it himself. He made sure he got condemned to die. He made sure. They made sure after that, but he was the one that triggered it. He made sure. He did it himself. And so they look for a way to kill him. He leaves the city. Of course, they see the fig tree. And that's when they go, look, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. The fig tree you cursed yesterday is dead and gone, just shriveled up. And he goes, and his first words out of his mouth, if you know that from Mark 11, says, have faith in God. Have faith in God. We are at that point in history right now. in the United States of America and world nations, we are at the have faith in God point. You know why? Why did he say all of a sudden, bang, they said, the fig tree's, it's withered. Have faith in God. Because the withered tree was a picture of what? What was about to happen, even if it was 40 years later, but Jerusalem is going to be destroyed, the temple's going to be destroyed, all that's going to go, Rome's going to destroy it. So he said, have faith in God. You know why? Because the world's going to change. And what you saw before, you will not see anymore. Religion will change, Jerusalem will change. Everything about being a Jew is about to change in the next 40 years. If you're younger, 40 years thinks like I got plenty of time. If you're older, you go, we better get hurrying up here, right? And we might not have 40 years. I'm just saying they had about 40 years, so 70 AD. And they said, look, the fig tree is withered. And he says, have faith in God, because you're going to have to live without that temple. The temple's going to go. The temple's going to wither and die. It's going to be destroyed. And you're going to have to live without what you have now. You can't have faith in the temple anymore, which is, they did, but they can't. So everything's going to change. He said, have faith in God. And then he mentions that famous line, which is so good. And he says, referring to the tree, he says, if you have faith as like a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, be picked up and cast into the sea, and it will obey you. Now, were we really going to see that mountain go and end up in the sea? No, it's the power of change by the will of God and the people of God seeing it themselves and cooperating with it and promoting it and speaking it into existence. And so there have been many things, good, great sermons preached on that, about the mountain moving faith and all that, which is excellent and good and important. If you got one in front of you and you need to move it, it's a great place to read. But in really what's happening, and some of you may have heard this before, it's written in one of my books too, or whatever, is what's really going on is what we don't know when we see the mountain be removed, is he says this mountain, and now we're looking at a mountain, and we're still there today. We're looking at Mount Moriah. Say that, Mount what? Mount Moriah. Today we know it as the Temple Mount. Problem, the temple that's there is not God's temple from our Jewish side. It's the temple from the Muslim side, right? It's there. They have it built there. So it's still a temple. You see that beautiful gold one. A lot of people get confused and think that's a Jewish temple. It's not. And they have built it on Mount Moriah, on the site of this temple, and on the site of some other things we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, so it's a holy site to Christians, to Muslims, and to Jews. And so it was the mountain. It was Mount Moriah. Okay, and so he's saying you can say to this mountain, be raised up, cast into the sea, and it will obey you. Now he didn't really want the mountain to go. He's prophesying that what is sitting on that mountain is going to go, which is the temple, Herod's temple. Okay. Has a few, right now you go over there's a few pieces left over, and then there's what we call the Wailing Wall, Western Wall, and you see that, but gone, and a million people were killed when that happened. Okay, so it's a big deal. And so it's the Temple Mount, and that mount is still there today, okay? And so Jesus seals, I would say, his own death on Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount. But that's where he turned the tables over, right? And that's it. After that, they're trying to figure out a way to kill him. And so he just keep that in mind. Can you hold on to that? So Jesus sealed his death on Mount Moriah. Okay, hold on to that. Now there's something else about Mount Moriah that's very interesting. Mount Moriah here's Abraham. Abraham's minding his own business. God talks to him. I want you to take your son to the place that I will show you again. I'll tell you about it in a minute. Abraham, I want you to take your son and I want you to sacrifice him. This is hard for us. Of course, child sacrifice is not legal in our normal way of thinking, but there's something else going on here that makes it different for Abraham. And so Abraham, being the man of faith he is, right, he's going to do it, And what's he going to do? So he goes, he takes guess what they get? Of course they get a donkey. He gets a donkey. See, that's symbolic to them, not to us. But then, and he gets a donkey, puts wood on it because they're going to sacrifice. You got to have a fire. Puts wood on it and takes 2 servants with him. Come on, we're going to go. Now, we're pretty sure the servants know what's going on here. It's not like he's going to surprise them, right? They know what's going on, but they go. And so they get there, and guess where God leads him? He led him to Mount Moriah. He didn't just say any mountain. He said, the mountain I will show you. And he says, there, you're there. You are at Mount Moriah. And I want you to take your son up to Mount Moriah, and I want you to sacrifice him to the Lord. Well, we're just baffled by it. You know, we can't handle it hardly. And I have heard terrible sermons by it, by the way. I barely mentioned this over the years. There's some terrible, terrible sermons because they want to humanize what's taking place rather than spiritualize what's taking place. And so I've heard it like, that's so Abraham, he took his son to Mount Moriah, and up the hill he tread. So sad. He's so brokenhearted. He's got to, and he's going to obey. He believes God that he needs to sacrifice, but he's brokenhearted. He's whipped by this, you know, and he's hurt, and he doesn't understand, and he's in conflict, but he's going to obey God. Poor Abraham. And that would be, what? How could that be possible that God put Abraham there on Mount Moriah, and he put Jesus there too? Is there a connection? I think so. Because he goes up, and when he gets up there, then, okay, it's time to go up to the top, to the Mount Moriah where he's going to sacrifice. And guess what he does? Powerful something you can learn right now about faith and life and everything else that goes with it and God. Because he goes and he tells the two servants, what does he say? He said, listen, what's the instruction? Go to the top of the mountain and sacrifice your son. Right? Okay, I'm going to do it. But he gets the two servants, and he says, you wait here for us. We're going to go worship, and then we'll be right back. We're coming back. What? How can he obey God and go sacrifice his son and say we are coming back at the same time? Calling those things that are not, maybe what is and what is to come at the same time, all that stuff put together. And all of a sudden he says, but we'll be right back. And I'm sure they knew what was going on, even if they didn't. Abraham did. And so to get the idea that Abraham's trudging up that mountain, crying out and wailing and all broken because he's got to sacrifice his son is not true, is it? Because he already said, we're coming back. We'll be a little while. We're going to go up and worship, and we'll be back. So whatever's about to take place on that mountain, Abraham is sure that he's going to keep his son one way or the other. And the Bible then explains it to us later, because Abraham went up there knowing that God has the power to raise the dead. God will raise the dead. And so he's got it like, okay, I can afford this. I can do this. You know why? Because I will sacrifice him, and we will be back, because the power of the resurrection is here through the kingdom of God, and I can sacrifice my son, and you're going to bring him back to life, and we're going to go down the mountain, and we're going to live happily ever after. So servants, you wait here. We're coming back. That's the power of the resurrection spoken by faith on the same mountain where Jesus is walking at this time when we celebrate Palm Sunday. And he is knowing. So he goes, turns the tables over, and they're going, hey, Jesus, don't you know you upset the Pharisees? They're out to kill you now. And what he said, hey, we'll be back. I'll be back. I'll be back. Because he believed in the power of the resurrection. And so when we get to this week, it's very, very important that we put this all together and understand we'll be back, because this anguish and all this pain, like being a Christian going forward to what God has for you today, oh, it's painful. Oh, it's difficult. Being a Christian is so hard, but it's not. It's understanding this. We are at that place. And you know what? Abraham's going up the mountain. You know how he did it? He did one thing. You know what? Jesus did the same thing. Jesus is entering as a triumphal king. He's heading towards the temple, and he's got to make decisions. He's going to turn the tables over, knowing what it'll do. All he had to do was let go of what he needed to let go, and it would trigger the resurrection power. If Abraham goes up and lets go of his, which he didn't seem to have, but lets go of his son, lets him go, because see, God had to do that too. You know the scripture. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son. He knew what was going on. Is God now, I've heard those sermons, by the way, too, where it's Easter week. Oh, God's so sad because he's got to send his son to the cross. No, it's not a pleasant experience being crucified. Lots of people were crucified back then, by the way. Lots and lots and lots. It wasn't just Jesus. But besides that, so But that can't be what's happening, because the power of the resurrection, if Jesus does this, all we need Abraham to do is let go his preconceived ideas about what it means to have a son and what it's going to do. Let it go, follow the command of God, and believe. And he believed that God was able to raise the dead. And so he realized, we can do this. The fire might be painful, but you're coming back, all right? And so then Jesus, now he's going in, he turns the tables over, but how can he do it? Why does he do it? What's going on? He's letting go what he needs to let go. He's letting go of his life, of everything about him. I'm going to let that go. And Abraham's going to let all the dreams of his son, he's going to let it all go, because we want to trigger the power of the resurrection. Would you agree? If Jesus had not done that, if he had gone and changed his mind as he's walking along, and he did it, right? He had that moment of let go. Remember where he was? Same area, Mount of Olives, the mountain, and the Mount of Olives is right there too. He's all right there, and he had to say these words, right? Not my will, but your will be done. If we can do something else, if we can let this pass, if I have another alternative, I'd like to see it or have it or consider it, but I know there isn't one, so I'm going to let go all my thoughts, all my fears, everything, and I'm going to let go. And as soon as he let go, the power of the resurrection didn't start on the cross. It did not start in the tomb. The power of the resurrection started in the Garden of Gethsemane when he said, not my will be done. Wham! The power of the resurrection was in force. Because it didn't matter if they killed him and crucified him on a Friday or a Thursday or a Saturday or whatever. It didn't matter. He's going to be raised from the dead. He's coming back. He's coming back. You see? Because he let go of what he needed to let go. And Abraham had to do the same thing. And so Abraham's up there, and all of a sudden the angels speak, oh, don't do it, don't kill him. And we go, whew, boy, that was a close call. No, it wasn't. Not to Abraham. Change of plans, but God believed that he's the God who can raise the dead and bring him back to life. So we make up these stories that don't exist because we're putting it into how we would feel and how we live and how we judge and all that, instead of really the way it was. So Jesus was experiencing the power of the resurrection in his mind and in his heart and in his life before the crucifixion, right? Before, and even before that, because he lived that selfless life anyway. So you got to die to self things, but it really brings into focus what he was doing that week. So the power of the resurrection doesn't appear when Jesus is in the tomb, right? It was already there. It's not like Jesus said, okay, resurrection power, B. He's in the tomb. They just rolled the stone. We better get some resurrection power. It was already there. It was in the world because of his obedience, because of his understanding, because he understands that God has the power to raise the dead and the resurrection power. Abraham had it too. He saw that. That's why he was able to do that and said, we're coming back. And now Jesus is in the tomb. He's crucified, obviously. But that's not where the resurrection power came. The resurrection power came when he let go of his life. In his own mind, in his own heart, and said, not my will. We're not going to do things my way. We're going to do things your way. And as soon as that, it's done. It's already started. And so same thing with Abraham. So what happens is when the power, what is that? When the power of the resurrection, which is where we're going from Palm Sunday to next Sunday, when the power of the resurrection is present, newness of life is present. Newness, say that word. Newness, that's God's. Everything is new. New creatures, new attitude, new you, new life, new everywhere. And it comes by what? The power of the resurrection. But here's what religion will do to you, and it has done to us. They've caused us, we believe, we're Christians, we go to church all over the city, Palm Sunday and next Sunday, Easter, and all the churches and all the Christians everywhere, they're all going to believe in what? Yeah, they believe in the resurrection of the dead because Jesus was raised from the dead. But they believe in the power of the resurrection, not the way it should be. Because they believe the resurrection is something that's going to take place when Jesus returns. So they say, yeah, we're all going to be raised from the dead. The power of the resurrection will, bang, it's just going to show up. And the graves are going to open. Well, then how did the stone get rolled away and Jesus come back to life? Oh, so resurrection power came, then it left, but it's going to come back again. You understand? So Paul said this, I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection. And somebody could say, well, that means later, you know. And then he said, and the sufferings, and his sufferings. I want to know what he felt. Well, if Paul is saying, I want to know what he felt, he's certainly not saying after I die and be raised from the dead and everybody's, bodies are. No, he said, I want to know the power of his resurrection now while there's suffering in the world, while there's suffering in my life, while there's suffering in other people's lives. I want to know the power of the resurrection. And you know why he could say that? Because it's already here. It doesn't show up at the end of the age. It doesn't show up when Jesus returns, and it didn't show up at the tomb. It was already there. When Jesus decided to let go of his life, all of a sudden the power of the resurrection was already in force. It was already in force. The time of day and how it happened and who the players were and whether it was Jews or Romans or whatever, it doesn't make any difference, does it? The power of the resurrection is telling us, and he's telling him, I will be back. I'm coming back. That's the whole point of this, is newness of life. And so we, in our day, what do we do with this? How do we apply this? How do we understand this on a day leading up from now this week to the next week when we celebrate the resurrection and the choir and all things will be here? It all depends the same thing with you. You can experience the power of the resurrection depending on how much you're willing to let go. Simple. If you hold on to this life does not have the power of the resurrection. It is what it is, right? It is what it is. You're born, you die, your body gets older. But the more you let go of your life, Jesus said, if you'll lose your life, you will find life. It's the learning to let go that is the problem. We hang on and we hang on and we hang on. We don't want to let go. We're afraid. We're like Abraham that we think goes up to the mountain. Oh, poor old Abraham. Oh, poor old me. I just can't die to myself. I just can't do. I'm always afraid. Well, that doesn't exist on Mount Moriah. See, and so all of a sudden we need to get a hold of this. And be the willing. The more power of the resurrection you want in your life, and it's here. And you understand, we're not talking about you dying. You're a living sacrifice. We're talking about what Paul said. I want to know Christ. There's suffering in the world. I want to understand these sufferings, and I want to bring the resurrection power to suffering people. Himself, he was suffering because of the way he was treated. I want to know the resurrection. I want to know how he felt. I want to know this thing. The resurrection power, because I want to know Christ, and he is the resurrection power. So it depends on how much you're willing to let go. And so many Christians today, so many believers today are in bondage. And we try, it's real popular. By the way, in my lessons coming up, one of the things we will hit is demonic powers, how to be delivered and what's real and all that stuff, all the things that I've been experiencing. I'll do that in these classes coming up on Wednesday night. But anyway, there's so many people in bondage. But you know what? They are in bondage to what sometimes people think are such difficult things, but people are in bondage to elementary things. They're not in bondage to high up things. They're not part of a witchcraft cult drinking blood on Friday night while we're here worshiping God. Right? No. They're in bondage to things that they hold on to while they're here. They're here, but they're still in bondage. The elementary things like rebellion. Did you know rebellion is the most elementary thing there is in the kingdom? It automatically, pride and rebellion ruin you. It gets you thrown out. Everything you wanted to do, you'll never get to do. I mean, you can try to create it yourself and sidestep it. You can try to make the best you can do of it. There's things you can do if you get in that mess. But the life that God had planned for you in the kingdom of God will be sidestepped if you have rebellion and pride. Because the life and future of Lucifer in heaven was not to be kicked out and become the devil. That was not God's choice. God never thought that. He would never think that. But evil was found in him, rebellion was found in him, pride was found in him, and he set his own course, and he missed what God had for him because of those things, and you will too. But it's elementary. Those are basics. They're elementary. Rebellion is stuff that stupid teenagers do until they grow up and they get better at it and learn how to hide it. Right? I couldn't leave that one alone, right? I had to hit that one. Can't leave it with the kids. So it's elementary. Pride is elementary. Did you know something is so elementary? So childish. Ego. Can you imagine having ego and standing next to Jesus? Standing next to even Paul, but being next to God and trying to explain your ego. How are you going to do that? Are you not going to have to do that? Of course you're going to have to do that. All the words you said, ego words, pride, rebellion, all that junk, all of that is going to be remembered, and we have to give an account. It's by our words we'll be justified, and by our words will be condemned. And the church has not learned a thing about that. They have you being condemned because you drink too much. Okay, that's not a great idea, but it says your words are what condemn you. It's probably the words you said while you were drunk is what it is. That's how it explains that, right? I'm going to get out of that one, but anyway, by your words, rebellion, pride, ego, and one of the big things that people miss that is the crime in the kingdom of God is control. You see, Jesus had to what? Let go. Abraham, let go. And when they let go, they saw the power and power of the resurrection, right? It's let go. And yet we have people, they want to control and control and control. And that's what Lucifer wanted to do. He didn't like God's choices. He didn't like what God was doing. He didn't like the system God came up. So he says, you know what? I'm going to do it myself. I'll do whatever I want to do, and I am going to exalt myself. And of course, he got thrown out with 1/3 of the angels. But how silly, how childish that is, that we learn, that we want to control things. Here we're a Christian. Jesus is my Savior. Jesus is my Lord. Well, then why are you trying to control everything? Why don't you let him do it? That's what he does. That's what he does. That's how you can walk up the mountain, right? Because you don't have to be in control, Abraham. You just have to go. To go. But you don't have to be in control of this thing, because you know the power of God was loosed when he let go. So you let go of these childish things. And so most of us don't understand, and we don't understand about the mountain and how it's removed. Have faith in God. That can't be have faith in your control. That you can control people. And control is a crime, control and rebellion. And the Bible says rebellion, I heard over here, is equal to and the same as what? Witchcraft. Why is rebellion like witchcraft? Because witchcraft wants to control. Why do you think they put that stupid chicken's foot in the pot in the first place? They believe it will control. Whether you believe it will or not doesn't matter. It's the motive. I want to control people. I want to stick pins in dolls because I want to control them. We say, oh, that's stupid. That doesn't work. Doesn't matter. The root of it is people out of the will of God want to control. And so all of a sudden, Jesus is my Lord and all that. So we've got to understand when Jesus said, say to the mountain and it'll be removed, you got to know what the mountain is. And in their case, the mountain was what? A mountain of corrupt religion was stopping the move of God. And it's very possible that's the very same mountain in our day. And we don't want to be a part of it. We don't want to be a part of corrupt religion that's control, loves money, right? It's just big business. I can go on and on about that, which is worth it at times, but not right now. And so we want to remove the right mountain. And so there's enough, let me tell you this and I'll end. There's enough power here right now to win. You may not win this afternoon, but you can act like a winner this afternoon. You can put win into motion, right? You can put win into motion. It's coming, but it now is. The power of the resurrection puts winning into motion because it's the newness of life that causes newness to come to where no matter the circumstances, we're going up the mountain, there's wood to burn. there's wood that's going to burn and sacrifice Isaac. But none of that moved Abraham, right? None of it. It made no sense because to him, he was seeing things. He was going to let go of what God said to let go. And he had all this faith for what God was going to do. And he brought it into the today. I mean, the donkey's still there with wood on it, and the servants are down at the bottom of the mountain, but it didn't make any difference. See, because he's willing to let that go. How much power you get? See, the power right here today, wherever you are. Hi to the folks in Chicago. I know you've had to make some adjustments. I'm proud of you for doing it. We're going to keep on and make it the very best we can. And other people, every other places, like, right? The power to win is here already in the world. We don't have to wait for Jesus to return. The power of the resurrection, the power of the newness of life, the power that caused Jesus to continue to go walk in the temple, turn over the tables, and they'll say, they're going to kill you. And he goes, yeah, but I'll be back. Right? I'm coming back. And Abraham did the same thing. The power for you to win is here in this room. What has to be is your willingness to let go. The willingness to let God win this for you through the power of the resurrection, which is not of this world. But it is here. It's here in this room. The power of the resurrection to change a life, to change your mind, to change your heart. But you got to let go of some things. You can't go up the mountain whining and complaining, right? And afraid. You got to let go. Okay, I trust you, God. I can let Isaac go. We can go up there and build a fire. Maybe a close call, which it really was. He's got the fire, he's got the knife, he's got everything. But all of a sudden, he got to stop, and we're glad he did. Because there was no reason for him to do that, was there? You know why there was no reason for him to do it? Because Jesus was going to climb that same mountain and be the sacrifice, and it would have meant Isaac, it would have meant nothing. There's no comparison to Abraham's son to God's son. So that's why he had to stop him, but he wanted to see if he would be of the same heart as the Father God. Because listen, I'm going to end it. Listen, though. You want to be close to God. And Abraham wanted to be close to God. I want to be close to God. You know what? And Abraham possibly is the only other man on the earth that could sit down and talk to God. What it's like to walk up the mountain Moriah knowing your son's going to be killed. Now, Abraham didn't have to go through with it. But he didn't know it at the time. They could sit down and say, yeah, I know how you feel. I know what you mean. I've tried that with God, have you? God, you don't understand my feelings. And then wait for him to say, yeah, I know what you mean. God, I'm really fearful. I'm fearful. I'm afraid. And you're waiting for him to say, I know how you feel. To a God that's never been afraid. No connection. But Paul said, I want to know Christ. Now there's the connection. Right? I want to know all about why and how he suffered and thought through all this stuff and got through it and how it empowered his life to see the joy set before him that he always kept going. And he let go of his own life so we could have the resurrection life now in the natural, and then the spiritual comes to where obviously the graves will open. We'll talk about that maybe next week. So anyway, you let go. So this is a broad statement. It may not apply to everybody, but it applies to most people, okay? Here you have it. If you're a Christian, you're spirit-filled or whatever, you go to church, you're kind of doing the right Christian things, right? And you're still in bondage. If you find someone in bondage, you'll find someone who won't let go. What other explanation is there? What is there? There is no other explanation. Your life was harder than everybody else's. That's not gonna go, right? You're the exception. That's not gonna go, right? There's no other line but just all of us. He says to let your life go. The old die to self, yeah. Pick up your cross, yeah. All those things that we just don't hear anymore. Yeah, they all work. They're not to ruin you. It's not painful. It's not so you can go up the mountain with Abraham and cry all the way there that you had to die to yourself. Oh, this was so hard, I had to die to myself. What? What are you talking about? It's going to get you into life. It's going to get you into the resurrection power that works in finances, relationships, personal prayer, personal walk, hope, vision, forwardness, everything, correction. Yeah, it'll correct you too. All of that is in this room to help us to win, if you're willing to walk the walk of Jesus. He knew exactly what he was doing. Nobody condemned him to die. He set the stage and condemned himself, right? Because he knew that God had the power to raise the dead. Let's stand up. We'll end right there. Yeah. Good stuff. Woo! Such great stuff.